3.
Hi, everyone. My name's Sofia Huerta, and I play professional soccer for the OL Reign. And you are listening to Circling Seattle Sports Podcast.
You heard it here from her first. This is Sofia Huerta from the OL Reign. This is, I believe, my 4th OL Reign interview, so that's really cool. Just great to have more of you guys on here. This is the Seattle interview series number 19. W League champion, She Believes Cup champion, NWSL second 11 3 times, current OL Reign member, obviously. How are you doing? How are things going? I know we've got a little bit of a break here after Challenge Cup has sort of wrapped up and before regular season starts. How have you been doing?
I'm doing well. Obviously, I'm not sure if you know, but I got traded during COVID, basically.
Oh, I thought you were saying something happened recently. I was like,
oh,
what?
no. No,
I was so scared. I was like, what happened? Okay.
No,
Yeah.
good. We're good. I'm not going to get traded again, hopefully. But I got traded to this team right before COVID hit. So I actually never came to Seattle last year or Tacoma. I stayed in Idaho, I was in quarantine with my parents. And so I've never really had a legit year here yet. Obviously, I haven't had a really weird year, but I wasn't even here. And then we obviously had the Challenge Cup last year in Utah. And so this is the first year that I'm in my apartment. I'm in Tacoma. I feel like I'm actually on the team, and it's been really good. I love the team. Everyone's really welcoming and nice, and the team's really good. There's a lot of new faces from the coaching staff to people who do things behind the scenes, and then even players. It's a really new team. I think there's you could basically say it's kind of like a rebranding, right? With Leon owning the team now, a lot of new people. So obviously that takes some time to adjust to and getting to know one another's tendencies on and off the field. But it's been a really good year so far. We just finished a Challenge Cup. We placed second behind Portland, who ended up winning yesterday in PKs. And then we start the regular season next week and on Saturday versus North Carolina, who are pretty much like the reigning champs every year. So it's going to be a fun game.
It's interesting you mentioned, just so many new faces, because it is interesting to see, the transfers from players that are not even necessarily with the team right now that might join later. And, in reading about the team, I know that they own the NWSL rights to Rose Lavelle. So it's interesting to see how transfers work. I have to admit, I don't have the total knowledge of soccer and all transfer windows and all that, but it's interesting to see how it works, and sort of interesting to see, like you said, all the new faces. So I want to jump sort of to the beginning. Where would you say that your passion for soccer sort of began or took off?
Yeah, well, when I was little, I have a brother and a sister, and they played soccer growing up. And so I just obviously wanted to be like them. So that's how I got into it. And then when I was younger, I remember watching the 99ers, win the World Cup. And that was something that I knew that I wanted to do one day. And so I think from an early stage, I just loved soccer. It was really fun for me. I found myself to be quite good. Everyone loves being good at something. I just always loved playing. So when you ask me when I really felt the passion, my whole life I loved competing and winning and scoring and playing in games. But I would say it really came probably when I was in Chicago. I was a pro. When you're in club, college, you think everything, you think you're really good, and when you become a pro, it takes everything to the next level. So of course I was passionate about soccer growing up and my whole life, but really when I was probably my 3rd year in the league, I understood how to be a true professional. I understood what it was going to take. I realized, you travel a lot. It's a lot of your time. It's exhausting mentally, physically, all these things. I think that's when I really knew I was so passionate about soccer, because regardless of what happened, I was going to play until I couldn't. And I realized that when I was 24, I said, I will play soccer as long as I can. As long as I'm good, as long as I'm playing, I'll play. So I think that's probably when I really realized I was super, super passionate about it.
that's I always do enjoy sort of revisiting that, because it's interesting to see how everybody reaches where they're at, how, because not everybody, there's no template for how to reach a professional sport, reach professional soccer. So it is sort of interesting to hear that not even until you're pro you sort of find the way that goes. So it's interesting to hear to me. To take a step away from soccer, even though I just asked you about soccer, what would you say your second favorite sport outside of soccer was? Because if I'm correct in my research, you played basketball and track in high school. Did either of those take the cake for you, or is there another one that you sort of see as a favorite outside of soccer?
Loved playing basketball. I enjoyed it so much. I wish I was better, to be honest. I think it's so fun and exciting. And I also loved playing volleyball a lot as well, but I didn't play volleyball in high school because it was the same time as soccer. So I did like soccer, basketball, and track, soccer in the fall, basketball in the winter, track in the spring. So, I mean, my second favorite sport, definitely basketball, but yeah, I hated track. Oh, horrible.
um, well,
Horrible.
in terms of basketball, you've got a good team to root for here in the Storm, being four-time champs and coming off that championship. But yeah, track. I've never been too much of a fan of long distance running in that form. Not my thing.
Yeah.
Um, what influences led to you attending the Santa Clara University? What came together for you to go to that university, or what rather led you there?
Well, yeah, just like the top players in every state, right? You are recruited. And I, was heavily recruited by some of the best universities for sure. More so like on the West Coast though. Like I never talked to like Florida or North Carolina or like East Coast. I don't know. I guess it wasn't that good, but it was the teams over here who saw me more growing up. And yeah, I knew I wanted to be in California. Don't know why. I just felt like California was kind of my spot where I wanted to be. And you look at the universities in California, and it's basically Cal, Stanford, Santa Clara that are like the soccer programs. So I visited all three, and I loved Santa Clara and I loved Stanford. And it was a really hard decision for me, but ultimately I think it came down to what was going to be possible for my parents. And that, obviously that was a big thing, but also like meeting the coaching staff and the players, I just felt like I was going to find a lot of success at Santa Clara. And like when you're that young, making such a big decision, that's kind of what you have to base it off of, right? Like, of course, I kind of got nervous, like, oh, like, what happens if I commit to Stanford and I don't get the right SAT score? Like, I had that thought a little bit, but I'm like, oh, okay, let's take that out of it and let's just look at the soccer piece. Like, where am I going to find the most success? And I just felt like I was going to get more attention at Santa Clara. And I felt like Jerry really, really wanted me, and that was important to me. Whereas when at Stanford, I was just another good player because they had so
Mm.
many.
Yeah, no, it's like you said, when you're making a decision that big at that age, it's like what's going to benefit me the most going forward, what's going to set me up the best. And obviously sometimes for some people that's not necessarily the first choice and they'll transfer, so yeah, I think when you're looking at it, like you said, it comes down to that, what's going to benefit me most going forward. And I guess, who values you better, you more, sorry.
Hmm.
Because like you said, why be another someone when you can tell that you're valued by the coach there.
Right.
Speaking about college soccer, do you have a favorite college college soccer memory?
I mean, I had so many good memories at Santa Clara. I don't know if I could just pick one, but gosh, there's so many. I remember, I mean, there's like this iconic photo of me. Well, I think it's iconic. Probably not everyone does, but where we were playing Stanford. And actually, my 4 years at Santa Clara, we never beat Stanford, not once. But one of the times it was 1-1. And in the last 5 minutes, I scored like the best goal ever that I've ever scored in my life. And I like ran to the bench, and there's a photo of me just like, I'm obviously so passionate. And that was a really cool moment for me because I think as an athlete, it's really hard to show up in those big moments. Like it is, and when people do, that's when they're really recognized. And it's like, wow, they're the greatest. LeBron, Megan Rapinoe, they're the greatest. But people say that after a big World Cup and, performance after that. So, it happened. We were playing Stanford and I scored, and, it was 2-1, and there was only like 12 seconds left before one of our defenders caused a PK and they scored, and we went into overtime and they ultimately ended up winning. But in that short moment, it was very cool. The whole school was there. It was like opening night. They marketed it really well. I mean, the stadium was full, like filled completely, and it was like awesome. So it was a really cool experience.
Would you say that, with the way that it went, with, just how maybe you were viewed by Stanford, was there any motivation to play against Stanford? Or it was like, oh, I didn't go there. They're just another team that we have to play.
I mean, I think there was a little extra motivation because it was like, hey, Paul, you weren't going to offer me, that's the coach's name at Stanford. Hey, Paul, like you weren't going to offer me a full ride, which is what I needed, to be able to come to Stanford. Because you didn't think I was good enough, because I wasn't. Their whole rule was that if you weren't involved with youth national teams, they couldn't offer you a full ride. So I guess when I was playing against them, I wanted to be like, hey, just because I wasn't on the national team, youth national teams, doesn't mean I wasn't as good as like the other players you gave full rides to.
Oh yeah.
But it was always fun playing them,
So then we jump here to the NWSL. What draft memories do you hold? Because I know for some people that's a life-changing experience. Sometimes it might not go out the way that people want it to. What memories do you hold from the draft, and then your time with Chicago? As you talked about Chicago a little bit when you mentioned your passion in soccer. What do you hold from being drafted there, as well as your time with the Red Stars?
Memories that I have from the draft. Well, I didn't go because I just wasn't sure that year. My Santa Clara actually didn't even qualify for the NCAA tournament, which is the first time in a really long time. And obviously it was a little bit of a shock because we ended up second in the WCC, and the third and fourth and the fifth place teams went. It was like very odd. The RPI formula can be weird sometimes. So is it RPI? I think it is. That's what it's called, right? It's just like a formula they do. So yeah, we didn't end up making the tournament. So I was just unsure of when I would get drafted. I wasn't sure if I would get drafted. I spent all of Christmas break staying, training with Jerry, but also making a highlight video of myself so I could send it to the pro teams. Because I just wasn't sure, So I didn't go to the draft. I felt like it was more important for me to be around my best friends and, my family at the time. So they all flew to me, and, obviously I had my team at Santa Clara, and we were just in the room, like, listening to the draft, and was drafted 11th, which is my favorite number. I'm number 11 to Chicago, and I was really excited. And I spent 3.5 years there. Team was very good. We always made it to the playoffs, and found a lot of success, and I loved playing there. But then ultimately I needed to make a career choice, and I then got traded to Houston. But my years at Chicago were a lot of fun, and I appreciate like all my teammates and all my friends who I met there, and the coaching staff. And I love Chicago a lot, but I made that decision back in 2017, or was it 2018, that getting traded was probably the best thing for my career.
So there's two things that I want to branch off. First, number 11. Is there a story behind the number 11, or is it just something that you've always liked? Is there a story behind wearing number 11 and having that as a favorite number?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a story, but I no one knows. But it's my favorite number as well. So we'll leave it at that.
Fit when that happened, huh?
Yeah.
Gotcha. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And then with the trade from Chicago, was that tough to sort of make that decision and say, this I enjoy it here, but I need a change? And then what thoughts do you have when you found out that Houston was going to be the next step?
Yeah, well, when I was playing on Chicago, I was an attacker, and that's when I was playing pretty well, and I was getting called up to the national team. And the national team coach at the time, Jill Ellis, felt that playing outside back was kind of like going to be my way into the 23 for the World Cup. So I was playing forward for my club, and then would go into camp and play outside back. And I think it's hard to talk about, because I think ultimately, if you're a good soccer player, you should be able to play wherever. But it wasn't as easy as it sounds, going from an attacker who doesn't really have to think too much defensively then being put into the back line where that's pretty much all you have to think about.
Yeah.
And just I didn't have the opportunity to really learn those basic defensive principles because I never really got to play there. So I would continue doing that for a year and a half where I'd go into camp, play defense, come to club, play forward. And then finally it was like, okay, I think you need to play, Jill said, I think you need to play outside back in the NWSL. I think that's the only way, we can try to make this work. So I told my coach I wanted to be traded, and everyone involved told me that I was going to play outside back at Houston. And at the time Houston was really not a good team. I mean, really, they were like last in the NWSL standing. So I thought, this is gonna maybe not be great, but I'll play outside back, and that's important, and I'll get better at that position. So I got traded and didn't see 1 minute at outside back, which is it was disappointing, also a little funny, because I was like, wow, at least at in Chicago, I was put at outside back every once in a while. Rory Dames would put me there just to try and help me. It was every once in a while, but just wasn't as much as I wanted it to be. So yeah, I went to Houston and didn't play 1 minute at outside back. Not one. So then obviously I asked for a trade a season later, and I got traded to the Reign because I'm like, I mean, obviously I understand that, this is a job, and, this is a professional environment, and this is kind of what happens. But I just felt like, no, I can't stay here.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, it's interesting to me to think about this because I with the show, I cover a decent amount of sports, and seeing, I'll take it in the NFL. That's how we'll relate it. Just people, they don't like their playing situation. They don't like what's going on, and they don't want to be there. Guy like Aaron Rodgers isn't happy with his current situation in Green Bay. Doesn't really want to be there. So it's interesting
Right.
how, maybe in the past it's like, oh, you got to just suck it up and just suffer there, I guess, to nowadays where it seems like that's more of something that's becoming a reality. It's like, hey, if this isn't the best situation for me, I don't want to be here.
Well, you slowly start realizing like it's not, I mean, you have some people who are like, it's all about the sport, but there is something to having balance and something to having like more than just your sport, which ultimately will help you perform probably better at your sport because you're not over analyzing everything. And I just felt like at Houston, like from the beginning, it started off rocky, and I just felt like, I'm not really going to probably find success here. So I need to leave.
Oh yeah. Like you said, that's something, that decision you need to make. Kind of a similar question. What are your thoughts when you were traded to the Reign? Was there any sort of preliminary thinking? You come up the Pacific Northwest, obviously not right away, but were any preliminary thoughts when you heard that it was going to be OL?
Really excited. Obviously there's so many appealing things to wanting to play for the Reign. The history of the club is very great. You hear a lot about, the reputation of the girls, and, obviously they've won a lot of games over the years. Since I've been in the NWSL, Seattle's always been a winning team. So there's that piece to it. But then also obviously just bought out by OL. So I just figured, maybe they won't have too much of an impact, but they're going to have a little. And I think that that's a team that I want to be a part of that's associated with OL for sure, or Leon, so I was really excited. I know a couple girls on the team, of course, everyone on every team, basically. It's a small soccer community, but I was excited. My sister lives in Tacoma. I'm from the Pacific Northwest. My family's really close. It's like an hour flight from Idaho. So I just kind of felt like I was going home, even though I actually have no ties to Washington. But it felt more like home than, let's say Chicago or Houston.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. There's a tie-in here with Houston, but I'll just get to the question first. How valuable would you say that your time spent with the Australia clubs, Adelaide United and Sydney FC, were to your career as a whole? How important would you say that going overseas would be to, whether it's just your career in general or you getting better as a player? And I'll note this now. That's what I was alluding to, is Amber Brooks spent time with Adelaide United. How valuable would you say that time over there would be to your career as a whole?
Well, I think it differs for every player, right? When I was first in the league, we had a really short season. Season was like 6 months. And then you basically had like a 5-month off season. You know, it was like you came in early for preseason and then, you know, so it was like 5 months of off season and then you came in before the start. So it was like in my mind, I'm like, this is impossible. How am I going to find training for 5 months? There's no way I'm going to really be able to get better. And so the only other option was like, okay, well, you go play in Australia. You know, that was the only option for me. So I think being from Idaho and always relying on my athletic ability, which is funny because now you compare me to the girls in the league and I'm really not that athletic. But growing up, I thought I was super fast. Well, I was in Idaho, right? So it's like I really relied on that. And then I came to the league and it's like, oh, well, everyone's fast, everyone's athletic. And I just felt like I was really not that technical.
Mm.
Like I was all right, but I really wasn't that technical. And so I think for me specifically, it was great for me to go play abroad because it allowed me to just get that many more touches on the ball. You know, you have some players who are naturally gifted or who have worked on their technical side their whole life. You know, I never did that. We never did that in Idaho. It was not a thing. I never did that. So it was really important for me to just add those touches, add those games, add those trainings, which I essentially I did for 3 off seasons. So really, I haven't had an off season for a very long time. COVID was really, or you know, when we were quarantining, was really the first time I had that. But even when I was doing that, I found a trainer in Idaho who I trusted a lot, and we worked together. You know, so for me, it was important. I feel like I really passed a step after my first season with Adelaide. That was in 2016, 2017. And I just felt like I got way more technical and I was ready to come into the NWSL and make a difference, which is what happened. And then I was on the national team. So for me, it was great. I know some players, it wouldn't be the move for them, but I felt like it was really important.
What differences would you say that you noticed, playing abroad as compared to in the NWSL? Were there any things that really stuck out to you in comparison between the two?
I think it depends on where you play abroad for sure. I mean, again, I went to Australia, so there's a huge difference in terms of the competition. I mean, Australia's league is just not as good as the NWSL. It's just the reality. So like their internationals are NWSL players who go over to Australia, whereas like every NWSL team has Americans on it, you know? So it's definitely not as competitive. They're much younger. You know, they go pro when they're 16 there.
Oh, wow.
Obviously our system's a little different here in America. There's a bunch of differences, but in the lifestyle is just completely different being in Australia. You know, it's kind of like, hey, let's go to the beach all day and then we'll just get dressed and go to training. I would never do that here. You know,
Huh.
like we'd have training at night. You know, it's like if I had a training in the NWSL, like at night, I'm resting and I'm making sure I'm ready for my training at night because it's going to be competitive and I want to start in the game. But in Australia, you can kind of like do whatever you want, go on a hike, go to the beach, get acai bowl, and then you go to practice.
Huh.
It's just funny. So it's a very different culture, even though in Australia they speak the same language, it's very different.
Oh, yeah. I'm gonna jump here to international team. Uh, how was it playing with a broken elbow? How do you even? I'm. It just kind of astonishes me. Uh,
Mhm.
if I'm correct, scored 7 goals across those 4 games at the time for Team Mexico. But how was that? What are you thinking? Not like asking you why would you do that. What goes through your head during those games? I mean, is there any pain, or is it how was playing with that broken elbow at the time?
Well, it's a really long time ago, nearly 10 years ago. So it's kind of, you know, hard to recall some things, but I technically my elbow wasn't broken really anymore. So basically, I broke my elbow, hairline fracture, wasn't going to be able to compete in the U20 World Cup, which obviously I've been preparing for months. Um, and they thought it was going to be anywhere from a 4 to 6 week recovery. And after 2 weeks, I got another MRI and I was fine.
Oh, I see.
So I think I just healed really quickly. Or the hairline fracture, like, I mean, obviously was very, very small. So, you know, I think I just got lucky. But it was funny. I do remember this. The moment I got into the game, I fell on my elbow and it was fine. So
Huh. Uh, damn, I felt kind of embarrassed with that. I was like, oh, damn, playing with a broken elbow. And it's like, oh, well, wasn't that bad. I was like, oh, okay. Um, What ultimately motivated the decision to make the change and play for the U.S. national team? Being the first female player to play for the United States national team and then play as well as play against the United States national team. What goes through your head? Hey, I want to make this switch. Um, for you, what was the motivation behind that?
Well, there wasn't ever really a time where it was a tough decision going from Mexico to US. The toughest decision was, should I even play for Mexico? Back when I was 19 and they invited me up to the full team, it was like, well, I've always had this dream to play for the US. Yes, I went to the U20 World Cup with Mexico, but that was just an opportunity. And, I knew I couldn't get cap tied playing on the youth team, so I didn't think anything of it. And when they asked me to play for the full team, I was like, ugh, that decision was hard because I wanted to, but I also did not want to be cap tied. And I just didn't know exactly how that
Mm,
worked. But I made the decision to play for Mexico, played in a few games with them, one being against US, and the score was 8-0. And I just remember thinking, like, I'm not that bad of a sore loser, but I will say that, like, being on the bench and hearing the national anthem and like the US national anthem, I was like, that's way more home to me
mm.
than, even though I'm very proud of my Mexican heritage, I'm very proud of my father and where he's from and all my family in Mexico. It just didn't speak to me as much as playing for the US. So I had recognized that at the time, declined the rest of the calls from Mexico for like a few years until I was called into the US, and that's when I needed to make the change. And that was a very easy decision to make. A lot of people were concerned. I remember Jill calling me and she said, like, you realize that if you make the switch, you can never go back to Mexico. And I was like, yeah, no, that's fine. That's okay. Like, I want to be on the US team. And I know that now, since I've been on the US team and haven't been called in for a little bit, people always ask me, like, do you regret that? And I'm like, no, of course not. Like, that was always my dream. And I didn't even know Mexico was an option until I was 19, really. I never thought of it. And, I'm really happy with what I decided to do because I think it's like really pushed me on and off the field, being on the team, not being on the team, getting called in, not getting called in. I mean, it's been rough, but I've learned a lot about myself. And I don't think that I would learn these things, if I would have chose to play for the US.
So you kind of alluded to it at the end there, but what sort of magnitude does playing for the international team for the U.S. What kind of magnitude does that hold? Because that's such a thing that as you were talking about, it's a dream for people. What are you able to put into words? How much that means to you playing for the national team?
Yeah, I mean, I think it means, when I was younger, it meant everything. As I've gotten older, I've definitely had to work on this and, take the pressure off and, remind myself that it's not everything and that just making the national team doesn't mean that I'm more successful. It doesn't mean that I'm a better person and that, it doesn't mean as much as I think it does, and I've had to like talk myself through that and work through that because it's difficult, that's like your goal. And when you get like a little bit of it and it gets taken away from you, it's hard. I think, obviously it means a lot though, because it reassures that everything that you've done and all the work you've put in, it's paying off, right? Like it means that you're one of the best. Who doesn't want to be the best at something? If you're on the national team, you're one of the best in the world, and you can compete on the world stage. So that means so much. But I think over the years, I've learned that, why put so much pressure on yourself? The national team is fantastic, but I'm sure people on the national team have problems too. I'm sure they have a lot of pressure. I'm sure it's hard. You don't make the starting lineup. You feel like you should. It's all the same thing. So, can I just take the pressure off and play well on the club level in hopes to get back on the national team? That, I think it would mean so much more this time around than honestly it did when I was younger.
It is interesting, to hear that put into perspective as somebody who's, gone through that. It's like, hey, there's obviously more to, doing all this than just that. So it is interesting to hear, your perspective on that and how that's gone. I want to take it now to the rain. And you mentioned, 2020 and having Challenge Cup not the way it normally goes. How was 2020 for you as a player and then as a person? How did you get through that year, both as a player as well as off the field?
Well, I was really lucky in 2020 because, you know, I was able to almost like not rekindle, that sounds weird, but kind of like my relationship with my family. You know, I haven't lived with them in a long time, hadn't been around them for a long time. And so I got to go and be in Idaho and spend a lot of time with my brother, my mom, and my dad. So like really when I look back on it, 2020 was like a really great year for me because even though it was hard, of course, and everyone's lives changed drastically and it was dangerous and, you know, unsafe for some people, it was so nice to like be with my family again and just kind of take a little bit of a break. But I also trained really hard during that time. Like I was training with my coach growing up and we went Monday through Friday, you know, for those like 3 months basically, when everyone was quarantining. So, you know, I also felt like I kind of took my game to the next level as well. But then Challenge Cup came and I hurt myself and I wasn't able to play in the first stages, like the stage games, until the semifinal basically. So that was, you know, tough. I really wanted to play and prove myself on the new team and whatnot. But you know, things happen. You got to move forward, and you know, now it's 2021, and hopefully only up from here. I think things are becoming more normal. Obviously, you know, just in the soccer world, which is very small, but you know, things are getting back to normal. Fans are there. You know, we're having a full season, so hopefully 2021 will be better. But you know, 2020 for me, there's a silver lining in everything, right? So it really wasn't that horrible. Although the days went by pretty slow sometimes.
Oh yeah. So how did you hear about the trade to the Rain? Because something that stuck out to me, a story that stuck out to me about hearing about trades is Cosette Morche heard about her trade because the team DM'd her on Instagram. And I was like, that is, at least to me on a professional level, I was like, how does that happen instead of somebody else saying, hey, we're trading you? You know, how did you hear about the trade?
Well, that is really unfortunate for Cozy. I'll have to ask her about that because that's very unprofessional. And I did not know that. But yeah, my situation was a bit different. I asked for both of my trades, and so I was very in the loop through my agent, you know, what was happening. And I was, you know, talking to him often, hearing about what teams were saying, which teams wanted me and which teams didn't, and all the above. So for me, I was, none of them were a shock. Um, I knew basically where I was going right away. And, you know, I knew the Rain was really interested in me, and that was a club that I wanted to go to. You know, there were a couple other teams interested in me, but I didn't necessarily feel like they'd be a fit. So I was like to my agent, hey, want to go to the Rain? And, you know, it happened. So I was lucky in that sense. I know people find out, you know, they're blindsided and stuff. So I've been really fortunate, but sometimes it's worse knowing because then it's like, do I actually have a decision in this? Like, should
Mm.
I say I want to go here, but is that really the best decision? Like, it's almost like the more you know, sometimes it's not the best. But again, thankful that I was kept in the loop though, still.
Do you have any thoughts on playing in Cheney Stadium? I know it's kind of an interesting venue to play in, and that uh, the ownership has said, "Hey, we're not moving the club. We're invested into this club in the area." And I know that
Hmm.
uh, with oh shoot, I forgot the name of the new facility, the new training field, but obviously the new training field, and that they're looking at different options right now for the
Hmm.
team's own facility. But do you have any thoughts on playing in Cheney Stadium?
I mean, I will say, as someone who takes the corner kicks, it's pretty difficult because you basically get no room. But you know, it's great. I think that it's a smaller stadium, so you know there can only be 2,000 fans there, but you really feel like there's a lot of fans there. So that's really cool. I've only played there a few times, but you know I like it. It's you know it takes getting used to, right, being on a baseball field compared to just like a soccer specific field. But I have no, as long as it's not turf, I'm okay.
To your point, speaking about having people there, at least when I remember when we were at the game against Chicago, It was really interesting. Obviously things aren't at full capacity right now, but getting that first goal, the Challenge Cup for the team, how loud it was. I was like, damn, that was a lot of pent up energy, I think, just to sort of get that underway. And then obviously the flood of goals from the rest of the game there, having three. It was interesting for me because I had been to games up when it was at Memorial Stadium here. Um, but then Cheney, I hadn't been to Cheney since maybe a Rainiers game way back. So it was interesting to be back in the building. Um, but I can't complain. Uh, what are your thoughts on up here in Washington? Because I know, like you said, haven't really had as much time here um, around the area. But what are your sort of thoughts on it right now? I know, being from not too far away, uh, you might have been pretty, at least a little bit familiar. But what are your thoughts on the area currently?
I love where we live, to be honest. It's so beautiful here surrounding the water. I really like this area. I mean, I knew I would like it. Nothing's to say, nothing compares to the Pacific Northwest. I really believe that. You have everything you need here, to mountains, to the lake, the ocean, whatever you need, it's here. So I really like it here, and I'm definitely glad to be here.
So now this is something that I've kept sort of away here for a little bit after mentioning Houston. What's your relationship like with Amber Brooks? You both were in that trade from Houston. Uh, is there a friendship there, from spending time in Houston now with the Rain, or is it more, you guys are teammates now, maybe didn't talk in Houston?
No, I mean, I think that we're older, right? We're like kind of veterans in leagues. We have our own lives. So we're not hanging out all the time, but like we're teammates, we're friends. We like talking about soccer, we take ice baths together. I think trades can always be difficult. And when we were both getting traded to the Rain, we kind of knew, and we called each other and we talked about it. So, we're friends. She's a great competitor. She's always someone you don't want to have playing, like you want to have her on your team and not playing against her. So I'm glad that when I left Houston, she came with me to the Rain.
Do you have anybody that really stuck out to you in the Challenge Cup, on the Rain? Is there anybody that you kind of looked at and said, wow, they're kind of lighting it up? Because at least for me, Leia Pruitt was kind of all over the field in those Challenge Cup games, and I was kind of like, she's having such a big impact. So is there anybody that you kind of looked at on the team and said, they're really just kind of lighting it up?
I think that, yeah, I was really impressed by a lot of people. I think our young forwards, Leah and Z, did really well. You can't ever not include Jess Fishlock and Shirley, in that conversation. Those are just two soccer legends. So I think anytime they're on the field, it's fantastic. But I think our team can definitely be better, but I was really impressed by pretty much everyone.
So with that being said, I want to kind of take a detour. Um, with things, how do I put this? Sorry, lost my words there for a second. In more recent years, I know over the pandemic, I think ESPN had NWSL on for like the first time ever, I think, if I remember that headline correctly. Um, and just with that happening, and with there was a news outlet here that did a 2020 in review, right? Sort of a little like notebook thing. They completely failed to mention the Storm winning the WNBA title, which is kind of hard to do, I'd think, if you were
Ignore it. Yeah.
sports. Do you have any things or steps that you would recommend, with the things that you think that, at least in the media, that need to be done to continue to help grow women's sports? Because from what I understand and just listening, because, obviously I'm not a woman in sports, I just, continue to listen and hear from the players, obviously with the Rain, but also with Drew Lloyd with the Storm. I did an interview with her. It's just a lot of it's just actually, making sure that you do cover the teams and actually put that spotlight on, and not just not do that like a lot of these outlets do. Do you have any sort of steps to what, we in the media can do to sort of just do our part, really?
Well, I think really the number one thing is exposure, which is like, what we're essentially talking about, right? It's like ESPN, the first time you said they had an NWSL game was, I don't even remember, but it's like we need those big social media platforms and TV networks to to be giving us exposure. It's like, it kind of sucks. Sometimes it's really hard for me to like get the games on TV. Like, we don't really ever have games on TV. And then it's like, oh, you have to download Paramount Plus, and then you're just getting a subscription. It's like, why can't we just be on TV? Like, this is insane. But I think it's getting better. The more, like, this is why I always say yes to podcasts like this, because it's like, hopefully it gives us more exposure, right? And I just think that's the number one thing. It's exposure, and then it's like fighting that fight for equality. It's like, we don't even have the basic needs that are the same as men when it comes to playing. Like, how are we ever going to have that be that? We can't expect society to have those equal comparisons if we don't even have that right now. Like, we need that number one to be first, and it's just having that support from everyone in the media outlets, that we deserve the same amount of money or support and facilities and everything as the men.
That's, like I said, that's why I enjoy doing this so much. It's just hearing, from you guys what I can do. Obviously I'm not ESPN or one of the major, news outlets, but just doing what I can and making sure that these stories are told. Because sometimes, someone I go onto the street might not know that there's a professional women's soccer league, so
Right.
trying to do what I can. And again, I appreciate having you on. It really is great to do these. But yeah, just trying to learn as I can, and just hearing from you guys I really appreciate you again taking time out of your day,
Yeah, of course.
and just the words that you can offer. I want to end with a lightning round. This is just a bunch of sort of supposed to be quick hitters. Do you have a game day item that you cannot go without?
A game day item I
Yeah,
can't go
anything
without.
that you need to have on a game day, if you're superstitious or not.
Oatmeal.
Okay. Oh, so that kind of takes out the game day meal question, I would assume. Do you have a secret talent?
I'm so bad at this. This isn't even fun. Do I have a secret talent? Oh my gosh, do I? I don't know. Now I need to think about this. I don't think I do.
That's okay. You don't need to. Just seeing if there's something that, people might not know. Do you have a favorite current soccer player?
Yeah, but I'm blanking on his name right now, which is really bad.
Oh, no.
Oh, he plays for Man City. He's young. He's that winger. Plays for England.
Oh, shoot.
I need to look this up. I'm just blanking on his name. Hold on, let me look it up. This is not lightning round, I'll tell you this much. Give me a sec. I don't know why this is so hard for me to remember his name. I'm blanking. You don't know who I'm talking about? Do you not watch soccer?
I have to admit, I can't get into the clubs overseas. There's just so much for me to pay attention to. So I stick to my local teams usually. It's you guys and the Sounders are my teams.
Oh, here he is. Here he is. Phil Foden.
Okay. Is there any reason behind that?
I just think he's sick.
Do you have a favorite pair of cleats to play in? Is there a favorite model that you have?
Nemesis.
And then do you have a favorite Seattle athlete?
Favorite Seattle athlete? I mean, I guess maybe Russell Wilson.
Okay. What, you wouldn't go with Megan? You wouldn't pick your teammate on that one?
I get sure I'll pick Megan Rapinoe.
You don't have to. Those are always kind of tough because it's like I don't like putting people on the spot. But again, I want to thank you for your time. Obviously, this is being recorded. Well, people don't know what time this is being recorded at, but just appreciate you taking time out of your day. Is there anything that you want to leave off on? Obviously, like you said, the games are on Paramount Plus, which sucks. I know the broadcast schedule got released, but I got it anyway just because I was like, hey, this is the option to watch the games on. I'm gonna watch the games on it. Is there anything?
Yeah, there's CBS and Paramount Plus. Just depends.
Is there anything that you want to leave off on? Anything that you want to promote?
Oh no, I'm good. I mean, obviously, yeah, I would love more people watched our games. They're really exciting, but if you're a local here, our games are allowing fans. So would love the support and then, come watch, women play soccer. It's fun.
I want to thank you for coming on and just hoping for really good season. And just excited to have a full season this year. Just grateful to have that. And thank you very much.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. It was great talking to you.